Hey y'all, in today's video, I'm going to be sharing 4 casserole recipes. These were all new to me, and I can honestly say that everything I'm sharing in this video was like exceptionally delicious. I've added all of these recipes to my list of favorites, and I will most definitely be remaking these over all the years to come. I would be proud to serve any of these to my friends or family. So yeah, I'm super excited to pass these along to you guys. Everything was super cozy and comforting, which is perfect for this fall season and the winter months ahead. So let's go ahead and dive on in. The first recipe that we tried was this buffalo chicken sweet potato casserole. So here I have 5 medium-sized sweet potatoes that I have scrubbed and washed really well, and I'm just chopping that up into small pieces and getting that transferred to my mixing bowl. I decided to leave the skins on because I have a hard time peeling sweet potatoes, but we didn't mind the skin, so I'll more than likely be doing that from now on, plus it saved a lot of time. But now I'm just going to drizzle these in some avocado oil. This oil is new to me. I normally use like the olive oil or vegetable, but I've really been liking it. And now I'm just going to season these up. So we're doing some salt, pepper, and plenty of garlic powder. The more garlic, the better in our house. And I'm also going to be coating these in some buffalo sauce. I have not seen this mild version by Frank's in forever. So I definitely need to stock up on that. It's Josh's favorite. He's not very good with spice. And also, why have I never thought to coat potatoes in buffalo sauce? It is genius and it is life-changing, okay? Okay, so now I'm just going to grease a 9x13 casserole dish with some nonstick cooking spray, and then I'm just going to dump on out those sweet potatoes and spread them into an even layer, and I'm going to pop those in the oven at 425 degrees for 30 minutes. And while those are baking, I'm going to go ahead and prep some broccoli. So I have 2 crowns that I chopped up and washed really good. And I'm just going to toss that in the same bowl I mixed the sweet potatoes in. And then I'm going to pull out 2 boneless, skinless chicken breasts. I'm going to trim off the fat, and I'm just going to dice it up into bite-sized pieces and top that right on top of the broccoli. And I'm just going to season everything up the same exact way that I did the sweet potatoes. So we've got our oil, the salt, pepper, and garlic powder, and plenty of that buffalo sauce. And same thing with the potatoes. Why have I never coated broccoli in buffalo sauce? I know it sounds kind of weird if you've never done it, but it honestly works so well, and now I want to coat all the veggies in buffalo sauce. But okay, so I pulled those potatoes from the oven. I'm just kind of shaking everything up so that everything can get somewhat evenly browned. And now I'm just going to dump out that chicken and broccoli mixture. And again, just spread it out. And that's going to go back in the oven for 20 to 25 minutes. I did cook mine closer to the 25-minute mark. Meanwhile, I air fried up some turkey bacon, chopped it up, and I also shredded up some sharp cheddar cheese, which now I am sprinkling over top of the casserole. I actually measured it out for once, which is something I don't do often, but I was trying to keep this relatively like healthy, so I didn't want to like accidentally overdo it, you know? So yeah, now I am sprinkling on that turkey bacon. This was our first time ever having turkey bacon, and we really, really liked it. So I'm definitely going to be repurchasing that. And you could totally add some green onions here if you like that, but I just replaced that with some freeze-dried chives. And that's going to go in the oven for a final 5 minutes just for that cheese to melt. And then for the final touch, I'm going to drizzle on some ranch. This Lighthouse brand of ranch is like the closest thing to homemade I have ever tasted in a bottle. It's super good, but that is it. I think that this looks super pretty. I would totally bring it to like a get together. I know that it's not your typical like bring to someone's house type of dish, but at the end of the day, we can do whatever we want, and I would be happy to share this with somebody. But here's my bowl. I would literally not change a single thing about this recipe. Everything was cooked to perfection, and everything and all the flavors just worked so well together. This definitely exceeded my expectations by like a million. Even Josh, who is not a sweet potato fan, loved this meal, and I honestly think it's just because of the way it was seasoned and the buffalo sauce. Like, y'all have got to try this one. And if you're into meal prep, I think this would be perfect because even the leftovers were amazing. Up next, we have the shepherd's pie. Now, I have made shepherd's pie in the past before, but this was my first time trying out this particular recipe, and this was by far the easiest one that I have ever made, and honestly, probably my favorite. So, to a pound of cooked ground beef, I added in 1 can of tomato soup, and I'm just going to fill that can about halfway up with water, give it a little shake just to try to get everything out that I can, and pour that on in. Then I'm going to sprinkle in this whole package of beef stew seasoning mix. For once, I didn't season my ground beef as it was cooking because I knew that this packet would have plenty of salt and seasonings, and it worked out just fine. I also threw in about a 12-ounce bag of frozen veggies, and I'm just going to let that simmer on the stove for about 10 minutes. And while that was simmering away, I went ahead and finished up my mashed potatoes. It has been a long time since I have shown how I make just my basic mashed potatoes here on YouTube, so I figured I would share a few tips that I've learned over the years, especially for the beginner cooks watching. So the first thing is to always salt your boiling water when cooking potatoes. It makes a huge difference. Also, if you have any leftover broth that you need to use up, cook your potatoes in that. It'll bring a lot of extra flavor. I've also recently stopped using cold butter in my potatoes, and I'll use room temperature. I truly think that it keeps the potatoes hot longer. I've also stopped using regular milk because I think that either half and half or heavy cream makes it taste a whole lot better. I also like to let that sit out for a bit to kind of take the chill off. Also, when seasoning your potatoes with salt and pepper, always start off with a little bit of salt and taste as you go. I cannot tell you how many times I've oversalted my potatoes. And then lastly, I like to use an electric mixer to make them extra smooth versus a potato masher. But okay, so now back to assembling this casserole. I have sprayed it with some non-stick cooking spray once again, and I have just dumped out that beef and veggie mixture and spread it out. Now I'm just topping it with the mashed potatoes. I wasn't sure how much to make to cover this dish, so I just used a half of a 5-pound bag, and it worked out perfectly. So I'm just going to get that spread out to fully cover that beef mixture. Now I'm just going to top this with some shredded cheese. I've said it many times, but sharp cheddar cheese is our favorite. I feel like it brings the most flavor, but literally any cheese would work just fine here. Just use whatever your family prefers, obviously, and just use as little or as much as you want to. But I'm going to pop this in the oven at 400 degrees for about 30 minutes. Here's what it looked like straight from the oven. It's super bubbly and golden. That's exactly what you want. And ideally, you would want to let that sit for 10 to 15 minutes. That way you can cut it into squares and it would look a whole lot more presentable. But this was one of those nights where it was a late dinner and I was just trying to get everyone fed. So definitely not pretty. It just looks like a loaded mashed potato, but yeah, it was super good and it made a ton. So we had a lot of leftovers. I actually ended up freezing some also. So hopefully that works out good when I go to thaw it out. Up next, we have the oven-baked beef stew. This recipe really caught my attention because I just would have never thought to make beef stew in the oven. So the first thing I did was grab 6 carrots and I peeled them and washed them and just discarded the nasty ends. And I'm chopping it into pretty large pieces, something like this. That's what you want in a stew. And then the next thing I did was I peeled my potatoes, washed them, and again, I'm just going to chop those up into large pieces as well. And I did cover those with water just so that they wouldn't turn brown while I prepare the meat. So I scored this over 2.5 pound chuck roast for just $9.62. Early September, it's been hanging out in my freezer, and if you've been cooking for a while, you know how expensive chuck roast can be. So if you ever see it that low, stock your freezer up, because that doesn't happen that often, at least not around here. So as you can see, I've chopped that up. I've added it to a greased casserole dish, and I am just adding some paprika on top. And then I'm going to take 2 packets of some onion soup mix and pour that over the top. But if you know me, you know I don't like onions, not even the dehydrated kind. So what I do is I kind of run it through a fine mesh strainer, sprinkle it over the meat, and I did take some of those dehydrated onions and I just sprinkled it over half of it for Josh and the kids because they don't mind it. Next thing I did was add my veggies on top, and then I'm going to whip together 2 cans of cream of celery, and 1 cup of ketchup. I know that that sounds nasty. I thought it did too. Like, honestly, it almost turned me away from trying out this recipe. But I got to thinking, you know, like when you eat meatloaf, there's a lot of ketchup in it, and most people like meatloaf. And also, I could see how, like, the ketchup in it tenderizes the meat from, like, the vinegar. So I was willing to give it a try. So, yeah, I just spread that out over top of the vegetables. And then I cover the dish tightly with some tin foil, and that's going to go in the oven at 325 degrees for 2.5 hours. So low and slow, and this is what it looked like before I stirred it. It's nice and thick, just the way you would want a beef stew. And I actually ended up having to cover this back up and run to the school to pick up my daughter. So it was about an hour difference from when we got to sit down to actually eat this. So it thickened up even more, but it was super yummy. But if you're not a fan of ketchup, you probably won't like this. You can definitely taste it, but it's like not in a weird way. If you're a fan of ketchup, it just worked out, and we liked a little bit of sweetness that it brought. And I just served it with some cornbread muffins using this mix, and it was just a really good meal. And again, the leftovers were also really good. Last but certainly not least is this chicken bacon ranch pasta bake. I'm actually calling it something different than what it's technically called, but a lot of people seem to get offended when I say the word, but if you know, you know. So to a large mixing bowl, I'm going to mix together a half a block of room temperature cream cheese, 2 cups of sour cream, and 1 can of cream of chicken soup. I'm going to thin that out just a little bit with about a 1/4 cup of milk, and then you'll need a packet of ranch seasoning mix. If you're using the bottle like me, you'll know you need 3 tablespoons to equal a packet. I know sometimes a lot of people comment and say they can't find that ranch seasoning where they live. I do know they sell it on Amazon. I've not checked the prices, but all I'm saying is it's an essential in my kitchen. We love it. So now I'm just going to add in a little bit of seasoning. I'm doing some salt, pepper, and some onion powder. And I'm just going to throw that together real quick. And then I'm going to add in some cooked macaroni noodles. While I was cooking it, I measured out 1.5 cups and, of course, drained it. Then you'll need about 3 cups of chicken. I just baked that in the oven earlier in the day and chopped it up. You'll also need about a cup of some cooked and chopped bacon. You can use bacon bits if you want it to. And also some shredded cheese. So after I got that all combined, you guessed it, it's going to get dumped out into a greased casserole dish. And after I got that spread out, it's going to get a nice layer of cheese. And yes, I know that the majority of the things that I cook involve cheese, but we really like it. And there are far bigger problems in the world than our cheese consumption, so just remember that before you comment anything. But yeah, so now I'm just going to add on the rest of my cooked and crumbled bacon. I'm also going to finish off my jar of dried chives. I totally would have added more if I had it, and again, you could replace that with green onions if you like it. So I'm just going to cook that at 375 for 35 minutes, and here is what my bowl looked like. This was super creamy and flavorful, and it was really hard for us to pick, but this was our #1 favorite recipe from this whole video. So if you're looking for a super cheesy and like outstanding meal to impress somebody or yourself, I truly believe this is the one. So yeah, as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you all have an awesome and safe weekend, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.